We'll get started here in about a minute. If everyone can please grab their seats. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our first business casual breakfast series event for the 2023 community campaign. My name is Daniel Weingarten, and along with my co-chairs, Gary and Jeffrey Marks, Ryan Halpern, and Greg Eisenman, we thank you so much for coming today, and it's great to see so many familiar faces. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce David Smith, the Executive VP of Regions Bank. David and Regions are a valued partner of the Federation and are the presenting sponsor for the 2023 Community Journey to Israel. David, come up, say a couple words.
Well, good morning, all. I think we've all fortunate sort of dodging the weather, got in here before it comes in this evening. But again, appreciate us having really the opportunity to help sponsor the journey. I'm going, so my bride and I will be there, looking forward to it. I understand it can be a life-changing trip in many ways. So looking forward to that. And Eric and team have been kind to let us sort of piggyback and help sponsor this as well as part of that. So again, look forward to the trip, look forward to the content for the meeting this morning. These have been great sessions. I've attended a number of them, and I appreciate the fellowship that we have during this. So thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.
Before we get started, we have a quick video that we would like y'all to watch. And
we are Jewish ATL, and we're meeting the moment together. Last year, when crisis erupted, you were there. You housed the homeless, fed the hungry, and cared for the sick. You made sure children could attend school. You helped Ukrainians fleeing war. You were there to lend a helping hand to those who needed it most. You met the moment. Federation needs your help to be ready when the next crisis arises. Wherever there is need in the world, we will be there to hold people up. We are more than individuals. We are a community. When we work together, we can do great things. We are Jewish ATL.
Good morning. I tell you, that video gets me every time. And if I look around the room, I see smiles and maybe holding back some tears as well. But we're so glad you're here today. My name is Jory Mendel. I have the privilege of leading the Atlanta Jewish Foundation, which is part of the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta. So we're in the middle of this year's community campaign, and it's a privilege when I look around because this room embodies exactly what that is all about. It's about connecting and caring for Jewish Atlanta and each other. So I know already I've met many new people in this room who are doing just that in your own capacity, and we're grateful for that. You also saw a lot of numbers in that video of the great good that we have done for the local community, as well as our brothers and sisters around the world who need our help more than ever. Together, we support our children and we support the world. For those aging in our community today, They need more compassionate support than ever. For those who are facing mental health crises, either within themselves or externally, they need to be able to access the resources they need to better themselves and be a thriving part of this community. For our next generation of individuals who are looking to find their Jewish identities, that is what we are here for. That is what the Federation annual campaign supports day in and day out. So you're in luck. You can make a contribution to the annual campaign. And if you do that by December 2nd, we actually have a matching gift. So for new donors, if you're hitting that over $5,000 mark, everything's going to be matched dollar for dollar. If you're over that, we've got matching dollars for that too. We look forward to talking more about that with you. We're really excited about today. I know I am the reason standing between a great panel and your morning. I also wanted to say one thing because I lead the Atlanta Jewish Foundation. And if you don't have a donor advised fund, or if you do, it's a great time to replenish your charitable banking account. If you put your money in, it's immediately tax deductible today. So end of year is coming. We're all looking at our finances and our tax purposes. So I encourage you to open your heart, do good, and also do right for your own pocket. So I'd love to talk to you about that. I'd love to talk to you about the annual campaign. Like I said, we are stronger together, and it is a powerful room here when we can think about the possibilities for Jewish Atlanta and our brothers and sisters around the world. I'll leave you with one statistic. We have helped, because of all of you here, we've been able to help over 40,000 Ukrainian refugees get the essential things that they need to start new lives, to move to places where they can feel safe, like Israel, like Atlanta. None of that is possible without all of you in this room today. So I thank you for being here. I'm really excited for this morning, and it's my privilege to call up our esteemed panel. Have a great morning.
So, Coach, Zoom. Sick. What do you want to say? Up to you.
All right. So I'm Alex Mastrangelo. I am the for WP Connect. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today. And we've got an awesome topic and an awesome panel here as well. First of all, I'll go off and introduce head coach Josh Pastner for the men's basketball team in Georgia Tech. He's going to be here as well. Let's get a round of applause. And then we got Keith Marshall. He's here via Zoom. Hello, good morning. He's the co-founder and CEO of the Plant Lounge. He's going to be here in person. He came down feeling under the weather, but still joining us via Zoom. So thank you so much for being here this morning. Really
Absolutely. I appreciate you all having me. One thing, I can't hear you all very clearly. So I don't know if there's a microphone or something.
He doesn't hear us very well. And then last but not least, we figure out the mic from the legit. Cool.
Yeah, okay, that's better. I'll turn this off. Cool.
That's better.
So don't worry. And then last but not least, we've got Andy Katz, the founder and managing partner of Venture Acceleration and Advisory. So we got a really great topic. Give him a round of applause too. Yeah. So we have it's been a really interesting dynamic in the landscape of sports, and especially college sports in the past couple of years, with the name, image, and likeness being passed legally. And for me as a sports journalist, being able to cover it, it's been interesting. And just overall, from former players to guys building their own companies to even coaches. So I think we'll just jump right into it. For everyone out here, just maybe talk about a little bit about name, image, and likeness and how it's just affected you guys in your careers.
Yeah, I'll just start off. First of all, thanks for having me, Kenny. Appreciate you inviting me. Like the shirt right there for Georgia Tech. Absolutely, my man. Okay, so yeah, no, name, image, likeness obviously has. By the way, before I even get into that, and we were talking about this when we were on the thing there, so I appreciate the outfit. I'm surrounded by my house. You know, just a lot of Georgia Bulldogs fans all across in our neighborhood. And one of the things in trick or treat in Halloween, what's interesting is all the kids that come to the house, you know, they know I'm the Georgia Tech coach, and they all want to yell, "Go Dogs," when they come to my house. So we have this thing going for now about 7 years that when they yell "Go Dogs," I yell Jackets and I throw the candy at them. If they yell "Go Jackets," I put it in their bag.
Right.
I don't think it's hard, don't worry. But it becomes a big deal in the neighborhood on everyone's yelling "Go Jackets" or "Go Dogs," and it's kind of a funny deal in the neighborhood. But I say all that to say, with college athletics, obviously things have changed because you do have the name, image, likeness, and not only the name, image, likeness. We've had the additional the extra year that the student athletes have gotten due to COVID, and on top of that, you've got realignment in college athletics. There's just a lot going on, kind of at a it's almost like a perfect storm all at the same time. And you're throwing on top of that name, image, likeness on trying to be able to recruit and win when technically in this day and age is almost legal, and to where you're able to give guys, you know, student athletes money to be able to come to your school. Technically, that's not what name, image, likeness was set up to be. Name, image, likeness was set up to be so an individual who was on campus, if they had a high social media following or something went viral, or maybe they had a great game, they could go to a local restaurant and get a free pizza, or maybe they had a social media following and someone wanted to be able to use them as an endorsement for a product. But it's become now, it's shifted into where now on the front end of recruiting, the prospects are asking, how much money am I going to get in NIL? And so it's almost have become pay for play. And until there's guardrails into this, it's becoming, you know, it's becoming wild in a sense. And it's really interesting dynamic. Obviously, I'm in the throes of it with recruiting. And that's kind of where it's happened with name, image, likeness. And it's a real interesting dynamic. And it's, I don't know if it's going to get stopped. They say until maybe Congress or, you know, puts guardrails where it's protected so the NCAA doesn't get sued. So that's really the big deal, is not to get sued. And the only way to do that is there's got to be a federal law. Otherwise, there's just not a lot of rules about it. And it becomes an interesting dynamic.
And we'll go to Andy and Keith who are on the other side. So you're the coach, like you're in the throes of it, but now you guys are also making businesses and working with these athletes.
It's created a lot of innovation. So we started a company called Mercury 18 months ago. The first month was in March, and we were focused on professional athletes. We weren't focused on college athletes because the Supreme Court didn't repeal the law. So I remember we had a board meeting the day that it happened, and we said we need to pivot immediately to college athletics. Colleges, universities have just tribalism in sports versus professional sports, right? You love your college team, not the player, so to speak. You stay with that team. So we immediately pivoted to college athletics. Ironically, the first client we signed was Kentucky and Calipari, your old boss.
Yep.
And then he said, I never forget, we were on a conference call, and he said, so I can use this as a recruiting advantage, and I can be a first mover. And so there's going to be multiple winners in the space from innovation, but so our Mercury focuses on dealing directly with university and assigning athletes. Keith has a great company in Aaron Murray. Aaron was going to be here, but he's still recovering from a concussion from Clowney in 2011, right? So you like that, Keith?
I do. I like it.
So I'll let Keith talk about his company, but they deal directly with the athletes. They don't deal with the university. So there's be multiple winners in the space. If we want to get into NFTs later, we can. But so that's, a lot of innovation that's created.
And Keith, I find it fascinating because you have your own company too, but you're a former Georgia Bulldog running back. Are you like ever kind of like bummed? You're like, dang, I could have made this much money if I was in college. Like now that you're out of school and now that you have your own company?
Absolutely. It's something that has certainly crossed my mind, and we talk about regularly, just kind of joking around with some of the guys that I played with. But it's been really awesome to see. You know, when I was in school, I was a part of a lot of the committees and different organizations that lobby for student athletes to get some additional resources and get compensated for some of the things that they do off the field. And so to see that come to fruition and to be a part of a company that in many ways is helping to spearhead what that's going to look like has been really, really cool. You know, to reiterate what both of these guys have said, I mean, I think it's created a lot of innovation in the space. I think it's changed the dynamics of recruiting. You know, when I was getting recruited, it was very important that these different universities had the nicest facilities, and you know, they rolled out the red carpet on the visits and things like that. And I think now it's really about, you know, what kind of check can you cut? What type of opportunities do you have for me to monetize my name, image, and likeness? And I think you know, there certainly needs to be some consistency across the United States in terms of the rules that are kind of guiding what the NIL landscape looks like right now. It's state by state. So I think people don't really know how to navigate those waters. And so as Coach said, it's really the wild, wild west right now. So I'm excited for the industry to continue to evolve, and I'm looking forward to some consistency so we all know how to navigate it.
Well, I think the next thing we got to talk about too is we talk about it's like the Wild West. Like there isn't really, like every state is different, even for coaches, like some can use it as recruiting, some can. I think it's fascinating that like international students, they can't even have NIL deals yet. So for you, I mean, what's been the biggest challenge for you dealing with it? You can't talk about it in recruiting, but it is what people ask about.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, each state's different. You're allowed to do different things technically per the rules. You know, you technically can't solicit or arrange for a recruit to get an NIL deal. But I'll give you an example. I mean, there's like, for example, right now for us at Georgia Tech, you know, we're trying to get our NIL situation situated and build it up. But we'll be playing against teams in the ACC this year where the payroll, which is, and it's legal, of NIL deals, you know, we'll play a team on the floor and they'll have a total of $1.5 million of guys playing on the floor, and we'll maybe have $0. And so what it becomes is amateur versus pro within your own conference. And so, you know, it's a pro team technically, like for an international team in a sense, on their payroll. And so, you know, what I would tell you is, and that's where it's probably gone across the line. And part of that is, you think about it, like, for example, there was a young man who's a good player who went to Miami, and he transferred from Kansas State to Miami in the offseason. And he got an $800,000 deal, and a 2-year deal. Now the kid's a good player, but if I told you his name, you would not know who he was or who, you know, or anything about him. And you'd say, well, what product is he going to market or endorse that anyone's going to buy? And those type of deals, when you're getting like 800,000 over 2 years, that's like deals like LeBron James gets for a quick Instagram or Twitter post or something to put on there for that type of money. But that's the reality of it. And until there's, and again, it's legal. It's the guidelines have allowed it because what is a fair market value? That's not set in stone. And so, and I'm for all, how do we continue to help the student athletes? I think that's a great thing. That being said, I do think it's important, and it depends on how you look at it. You know, once you get into pay for play, you start becoming professional. You can say, well, are you guys pro? And we don't want to cross that line. I think that's really important. And that is why the NC2A has asked help from the government. Because if you've noticed, everything comes down, and Keith knows this, Andy knows this, that it comes down to lawsuits, because they're getting sued all the time and they're losing every lawsuit. So the only way not to get sued is you've got to have a federal law. Otherwise, they can try to say, I have an NCAA rule, and they can try to go after, because they're not going to go after the kid, the student athlete. They will go after the school and the coach and the program. And so, but if you want to then go and get a lawyer and sue, probably with the rules and the laws, like you're prohibiting them to be able to do that. So that's why they're really pushing on that. And I don't know if that will ever happen within Congress, because they've got a lot of other things dealing with and worried about the NIL. That being said, that's kind of where it's at. And so it's a real interesting dynamic, because in recruiting, for example, like a school like Georgia Tech, of all the great things we're talking about, the ACC Atlanta, the degree that you can get at Georgia Tech, the opportunities and the people that you can meet, and I could go on and on and on. When the first question that I get from all the prospects are, Coach, what am I going to get in the NIL? And as you mentioned, the only thing I can say is, hey, you'll have NIL opportunities. But when other people can say, well, this is what our guys have received to this point, and show it on a deal, that makes a world of difference when you're dealing with an 18-year-old.
I wonder if they're less motivated.
Yeah.
So the players that are like that transfer, is he less motivated to practice? Use it to your advantage to say, hey, these guys have 1.9 million payroll we're playing against.
Yeah, no,
Dude.
you can use it maybe in a way, but the kids would rather have the money. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Is it also,
Absolutely.
is it almost like also, I don't know, like a turnoff as a coach? I mean, it's new, right? That you're like, I want to know how much money I'm going to make versus like, I want to win a championship.
well, I think the way is for the way I look at it, and I tell our staff this, like, there's like, whether it's conference realignment, you got the additional COVID, you got NIL, like, we don't have time to, change is happening and is happening so fast. You can't complain about it. Like, you gotta adjust, embrace it, deal with it. You got to be flexible. And it just kind of, those are things, it is where it is. And Keith knows this better than anybody. I mean, he played at the highest level. And speaking specifically for basketball, I mean, it's almost impossible to play in the NBA. You go watch the Atlanta Hawks, you see how good those guys are.
Yeah.
Like, I've been around guys who are really, really, really good and who don't get a sniff in the NBA. It's almost impossible to make that league. And if you look at like guys like at Carolina, they went to the championship. A lot of those guys came back, the Carolina basketball team, because none of those guys are going to get drafted in the NBA, but they got incredible NIL deals to stay. And so it's just some of these guys are coming back to school because the most money they will make as an athlete will be at college, because the reality is once they leave, they might get a cup of coffee here or there.
Yeah.
But the money they're going to make is going to be the most in the NIL.
But we do love to watch Jose Alvarado. He's doing great with the Pelicans.
Yeah, he's done well for himself.
But for Andy and Keith, though, too, since there is kind of like this Wild West, no rules, does it make your job easier or harder? And I'm so fascinated, like, how are you going out and finding the schools or the players to invest in? Because how do you know that they're going to produce for you?
At Mercury, we got very lucky because the focus is on Power 5, great traditional programs. So we got Kentucky first, and then we signed Kansas, and then they won the national championship. And then we did good work with the platform. We won't get into blockchain and NFTs unless y'all want to. But and then we just word of mouth, we snowballed. And we just started signing players now. We just announced Oklahoma 2 days ago, and we just did a deal with the women's softball team. So we're digitizing the national championship ring. And it's created, it's the good thing about NIL, it's created a lot better fan engagement opportunities. So an example is if you buy the first one, the first really neat one we did was we digitized the Kansas basketball floor, the court, Allen Fieldhouse. And it's sold out in 2 minutes, digital versions. But if you took ownership of the NFT, you got to go to practice. You got to meet the coaches and the players. You got to FaceTime with X amount of players. So we're creating these experiences, same thing that Keith is doing at the Players Lounge. That's where the innovation has come in, and it's make it a lot better for the fans to be involved. And let's just focus on this. There's something they call royalties.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say Alvarado, he kind of didn't get as lucky because he missed that year. But let's say he makes it great in the NBA. If one of you own his NFT and you sell it in 5 or 6 years and it keeps getting sold, technically the athlete or the talent or the artist can they get a percentage of every sale. So it's not talked about a lot, but that's how blockchain technology can track that digital ownership. So in the future, you're going to see digital ticketing. So imagine if you went to the 90 Georgia Tech, I think they shared it with Colorado.
Yeah.
But if you went to that game, you can say, Kevin Butler, y'all are Georgia fans, most of you. Kevin Butler made that 61-yard field goal to beat Clemson in 30 years ago. I know Kevin, he says, Andy, 400,000 people told me they were at that game, right? Saw that kick at Death Valley. So now if there were NFTs, you could actually know who was at the game.
Yeah. Oh, that's
so it's really interesting what's going to happen. It is the Wild Wild West. So
yeah, it really is. And I'm always curious, like, what's going to prevent it from going into high school? Like, like what's going to keep it eventually? Yeah, I know. And I can see that. And for Keith, for you, I mean, how do you go about finding these guys and knowing that like it's a good investment for you, and how are you enticing them to come over to you?
Absolutely. So I think the dealing with the student athletes has actually not been a challenge. I think they're all hungry to get these different NIL opportunities. The way that we've set up our platform is to really suggest that, we're asking them to do the same kind of information content share that they've been doing for free for years. And we're trying to create a platform that allows them to get compensated for rather than third parties such as a Rivals, 247, a Scout. So I think, they're already doing a lot of these things. We're just creating that infrastructure. The challenge has been more so dealing with the other entities that have popped up. So the collectives, they're trying to figure out how to navigate this space. they're becoming somewhat of the gatekeepers at these different universities. And so figuring out how we can be nimble enough to partner with them in service of the student athletes. And then you get into things like the IP rights with the CLC or the sports properties rights, and being able to use these schools' logos and in different NIL deals. And that has been where it's been a little bit more difficult, because all of these different entities are really figuring out this ecosystem at the same time, while, like we've already kind of talked about, the legal side of things is really in flux. And so being nimble and flexible and trying to navigate all that is where we have run into the most headache, I would say.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting too, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can't, they're 18, 19-year-olds, they can't have agents yet, because then that's breaking a rule, but they can have managers.
Marketing agents,
Marketing agents.
not agents to be dealing with contracts for a professional sports team, but they can have marketing agents, and the marketing agents a lot of time are people that are that do sign, that
Them
do
eventually.
contracts. So they try to get the guy for marketing, and then when they go pro, they just move that contract over to a
CAA is one of the biggest in the industry, and they know what they are.
Yeah.
Right? In IMG. So exactly.
Yeah, because that's what they said. They started up this branch. So basically then they can just slide
Yeah,
over
that's correct.
and grab them eventually, which I think is really
Well,
interesting.
here's what it is a lot of times, so in NIL, you think about it in a marketing plan, the agent gets 20%. So if somebody was getting $100,000, and 20%, you're getting 20 grand. Whereas a contract, you might only get 4% or 3% exactly. So actually people are looking for college, the space for some of the agents are trying to get the marketing deals, because you get a 20% deal. And if you're a good college player, and Andy and Keith, Keith, you probably know this better than anybody. Like, for example, like, I don't know, Stetson Bennett, will he ever play in the NFL? Maybe not. I don't know if he's good enough, I don't, but probably not. But I'm sure he's making a whole heck of a lot of money in college. And if you're his agent in NIL, if the contract says 20%, you're making a good buck on that. And he's probably making a lot of money, and he might never, ever get a sniff in the NFL. He's probably not good enough. Not that he's not a great college player, but Keith knows, it's that the NFL is just like the NBA. It's almost impossible to make that league. You have to be so good. And that's the interesting dynamic of it.
Yeah. And Keith, do you find that like guys are telling you and girls are telling you, like, I'm going to stay an extra year because I can get this, I can be paid 2 more years here than potentially take a risk going pro? Have you seen that yet?
I have not personally been told that, but I have heard through other people that Stetson, for example, did come back partially because he knew the NIL money that was on the table for him. And I'm sure that weighs into the decision. I mean, at the end of the day, people are going to make a financial decision a lot of times. And when you have, in Stetson's case, $1 million of opportunities, it will entice you to come back, So.
What's amazing, I think, he had a running back in the backfield of Georgia, Todd Gurley.
Yep.
Remember, Todd Gurley got suspended. How much did he make when he got suspended? What was that, like a couple $100 for signing autographs?
Yeah, we'll say a couple $100. Yeah.
I'm sure they have better stories. But I mean, it's crazy how it's all changed.
Yeah, it is. I want to talk, you brought it up, is the NFTs, because I think that's something, it's the non-fungible tokens.
Exactly.
It sounds like so weird and scientific. So talk about it, because it's all digital now.
So it's all digital. It verifies ownership of who owns what. So back to the royalties and the tracking, but it was actually started in 2014. Anything can be digitized and created to a non-fungible token. If y'all been seeing the market though, like the block Bitcoin, everything's down, crypto's in a crypto winter. The good news for Aaron's company and my company is we're not really tied to NFTs. We're tied back to that fan, right? I'll never forget this. I love golf. Bryson DeChambeau is a friend. He launched an NFT project. Okay. No one knows this and no one bought it. And at the time, this is before Live Golf. This is right when it all got crazy, hectic. And nobody bought it. So I had a call with him. He said, why is nobody buying my NFT? And the problem was back then that to own an NFT, even 18 months ago, you would have a digital wallet. Who in here has bought an NFT before? Anybody? Interesting. Okay, I thought it would be like 2 people.
Yeah.
Very good. So were you able to use a credit card, or did you have to do a crypto wallet? Yeah. So about a year ago, it changed. So I said, Bryson, the reason your golf fans don't know how to buy an NFT, 50, 60-year-old guys, and they don't know how to buy an NFT. So luckily the technology has advanced where the Players Lounge, Mercury, most of these platforms now, you can use a credit card. So, but it's still a hard process to figure it out.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like, it's like, I don't know, something from space.
Did anybody get an experience when they bought an NFT? Like, did you get to meet, what was the experience? Did you get to meet a player and hang out, or? Got it.
So Keith, someone
There you
someone
go.
here had bought one from the Players Lounge already. an
Ah, I
NFT.
love that. Love that. Yeah.
Are you finding that, I mean, are you selling more? Are you doing more with NFTs as people start to learn more and more about it?
Yeah, I think because of the overall market, we've had to reposition our relationship with NFTs. Initially, when we came to market, we were selling the NFT. That was what we were pushing. Now we focus more on the experience and the utility, and that's delivered via NFT. So, to reiterate what Andy has said, all of our stuff is more about experience, really in enhancing that fan experience. And so, for example, we've done things where we've auctioned off 5 NFTs. The holders of those NFTs get to go spend a day with, the star running back at Georgia, or, get to go do a golf tournament with some of the players at UGA and things like that. And so the NFT is basically just a ticket. That's what we kind of call it when we're pitching it to people. It's not really the digital art, the Bored Ape, the things that, went viral a couple of years ago where everybody was all excited about it. That has since waned. And so I think a lot of the consumer sentiment around NFTs has dampened, which is why we've kind of repositioned ourselves to focus more on the utility and the experiential aspects of it.
Interesting. And the next topic that I think is really interesting, I like it because I'm a woman, that the women are making more when it comes to NIL deals. I find this fascinating, and I love to hear that because it's very rare I could say that.
When you look at the aggregate, women are making more money in NIL than the men in college. Absolutely.
Why?
They're better at social media. Brands like it better. They're more marketable. But the top guys in football are making more than anybody,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
There's 2 twins. I forget their names.
Yeah.
Females.
Yeah.
Miami right now.
Yeah, they're Miami.
Yeah.
They transferred. They made
Fresno.
fortune. We need to do it. You need to do a Ted Lasso
Yeah.
from the ACC championship
Yeah.
with the mask on.
Yeah, I know. The
Yes.
face show, I know, I should. Too bad he wasn't around then, you know what I mean?
Well, no, but you can do it now. You can do it now. There's some smart engineers at Tech
Yeah,
can figure that out.
Well, I told him during that time, I told Georgia Tech, they should treat it like NASCAR and put advertising
Yes.
on it and make money for Georgia Tech. They didn't take my
Or had all the fans wear it one day,
That's
sell it in the shop. But Keith, how many women do you have? And do you see that they're, I don't know, doing better than some of the men that you have?
So all of our deals are the same that we sign the athletes to. We've signed some women at Texas, Oklahoma, a couple of gymnasts at LSU. Our focus has been predominantly football because of our relationships. And so we entered the market with football, but the long state vision is to be across all sports. And obviously we want to provide the same opportunities to our female athletes as well. Now I do think that the stat may be a little bit different. I think it's the average women's deal or female deal is bigger than the average male deal. But I think, in terms of total volume, I think football has been the dominant NIL generation revenue so far.
Okay.
Could be wrong, but that's how I understood it. Yeah.
And I'm curious for you guys, how are you finding these athletes from all over the country? Like, do you have a group that's like studying like stats and teams and like, I don't know, is there a calculation of how marketable they can be?
I'm not day to day at Mercury. I'm on the board. So
Okay.
I really don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think
Okay.
a lot of it's probably about social media
Okay.
and how big the following is.
TikTok going
They
viral.
have a big play though. I bet 5 companies are calling. There's
Yeah.
a big play the night before. So it's a great
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Let me say 2 things on the NIL too, when you think about it. Number one is think about that. If I came to one of you and said, okay, and you're a big donor towards Georgia Tech or to a school, and I asked you, okay, I got to get a recruit, a 19-year-old, 18-year-old, and I need you to, $100,000 in a sense. Can you put, if there was somebody coming to say, put it in a collective, or can you give this person this deal? Well, think about it. How about if that 18 or 19-year-old or even 20-year-old, 21 doesn't pan out because, it doesn't work out? Well, that donor is going to be looking at like, wait a second, I gave this money, it doesn't work out. And all of a sudden, like the donor then becomes the owner. You can't fire you can't fire the kid, the young person. Then all of a sudden they're going to the athletic director and friend, hey, I donated all this money to school for this kid. He's not playing. He's not as good as I thought. Get rid of the coach. And I think that's a real delicate issue because, the donors can become owners. And then all of a sudden you're not only reporting to your athletic director and president of your school, you've got different people involved. I mean, and so there's that one. And then the other thing is right now, there's no better time to be a student athlete. I mean, the amount of opportunities for a college student athlete, you get the educational benefits, which is $59.70 a year. tax-free. You get cost of attendance tax-free. You get a full scholarship, unlimited food, unlimited medical care. I could go on and on. Now, the NIL is usually when you get an NIL deal, you are taxed. You know, so let's say someone gets $100,000. It is a 1099. A lot of people will get out of that. And when you think of a 1099, I mean, the amount you have to pay a lot that comes just out of that as well too, plus everything else when it's because you're technically it's your own business in a 1099. So there's a lot that comes out of it. But I tell people all the time, tell me this, because again, every kid, every young person I deal with, they all talk about it, their goals to go to the NBA. Well, first of all, right now there's 97% of the NBA is 6'7" or above. Yeah. 22% of the NBA is from international. Yeah. And so there's a lot of people out there. Yeah. And so you can be a really good player and just not be good enough to play in the pro level. And there's 450 roster spots every year in the NBA, and only maybe 30 to 40 come available. So there's 450 people every year on those teams total. That's 450 in the world, and only 30 or 40 that contracts come open where you can slide in. So it's like winning the lottery to get into that league. And I tell recruits, like they all say at the NBA, it's okay. Here's the deal. You're going to get free this, unlimited medical care, unlimited food. You're going to travel on charter planes, stay at 5-star hotels. You'll have a omelet chef to cook you the omelets there on every morning. Unlimited tutor. You're getting a free education. I could go on and on and on. Unlimited gear, playing in front. Most people would sign up 2 hands. Hey, you can, my son or daughter, you can take him to college, whatever you got to do. You know, when you think about what's the opportunities for that. And so a lot of people, and yes, is college athletics a big business? Absolutely. There's a lot of opportunities in that. And like I said, there's no greater time for a student athlete. That means that on the reverse side of it, the opportunities for the young person in today, even without the NIL, if you take that out, because of what the opportunities just taking out of getting the NIL money is incredible when they think about it. Because the chances of going pro, and I've said this for you can get on the NCAA about a lot of things. One of the things I've always said they have not done a good job about is talking about the numbers of how almost impossible it is to play in the NBA, and how important it is to get the education, and how important it is to take advantages of being at the school and the people that you meet, where you're not just trying to get a job, you're trying to get a career, and you're thinking it's a 40-year decision, a 50-year decision. And when I tell kids this all the time, I'm like, think about it. If you are so lucky to play in the NBA and you play a decade in your life from 22 to 32, if you're that lucky and you live to your 90, if you're that lucky to live to your 90, okay, you've got almost 60 years left to live of your life without ever playing a competitive sport. So your life beyond sports is you're going to spend most of your life beyond sports, and to be able to recognize that. And it's a great opportunity. I tell guys, your second career is where you should be making most of your money when you think about how to network and take advantage of that. And those are some of the things I'm giving a sales pitch on Georgia Tech, by the way. I'm being the power of Georgia Tech. But I try to tell the guys that because of them understanding about, yes, you're talking about the NIL and what you can get out of that. I hope you do. I hope you all can make $1 million every guy. But the reality is taking advantage of what you have right here is really darn special, and don't take it for granted in a sense.
But do you see, and I think Keith, maybe you might know about this too, but do you see like colleges now creating classes so that these guys know how to manage their money? Like I remember, I wish that there was someone taught me about the stock market instead of like algebra 2 that I've never used. Like, you know what I mean? Do you see that now more that these guys are learning? What do you see, Keith?
I've heard of some universities putting in some NIL courses to help the kids with finances and things like that, putting some resources around them. Now, obviously, most universities have finance classes outside of anything dealing with NIL. I actually studied finance myself. And the reason I took that class, because I had the hopes of going and having a long and successful career in the National Football League. And I was like, I want to be able to understand how to manage my money for myself, as opposed to kind of offloading it to somebody else. And so those resources are certainly there for the student athletes. I won't I'm not going to tell a lie and say that most of these guys are thinking that way and are taking advantage of some of those opportunities that Coach just spoke of. I think, a lot of the younger kids, they are somewhat short-sighted. And so, they're really focused on, hey, can I get this money right now? Can I, put my family in a better situation right now, as opposed to thinking about the power of this degree, the power of the network, and the relationship that I built while I'm in college. So I think that's really strong that he hit on that. But I will caveat it, on the other side and say, I do think it's also very important that they are able to get compensated while they're in college, because, ultimately they're a part of a value chain that is generating a lot of money, and they're the core of that. And so I think it's really strong that they get an opportunity to benefit from it now. And the resources certainly could be there to help them make sure that they're good stewards over that.
Yeah, because they're getting a lot of money, so they're going to get taxes and all that stuff.
Josh mentioned all the money in college sports. I think they just had a nice raise, but if you look at the last 6 months, companies have raised hundreds of millions of dollars in this space trying to innovate. Mercury just raised, we announced $7.5 million 2 weeks ago. So there's a ton of money going in. So a lot of companies, a lot of people are also worried, what is NCAA? Are they going to get off their schneid and do something, right? So there's a lot of money in this right now.
Well, and Keith and Andy would know this better than I would, but what happens is if what happens if, like Andy just said, the amount of money is raised and the young, and for someone doesn't perform, and it doesn't perform based, they've gotten a deal and they don't perform at that level, what happens?
You got to give them more minutes.
Well, and
I'm kidding.
exactly.
The gambling though, right?
Does the market shift and then come down, and then you say, like, does that change? And so and Keith and Andy would know that better than I would, but would the market then shift where they're saying, because right now there's a lot of money going.
I think in professional athletes, professional sports, yes. Back to college where Mercury and TPL is focused, doesn't matter, because there's always going to be a next season. But the coaches, I didn't think about the coaches after some of these coaches in these big schools.
Hey,
I
would be real if I would be real hesitant to tell a person that on an 18-year-old, like, because I've seen it. You get these 5-star recruits, they come into college and they're not as good as, like, you all of a sudden you're playing against a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, 5th-year senior against this 18-year-old. And the 18-year-old might have more potential down the road, but the 22, 23-year-old is going to be better than the 18-year-old in college. I'm not talking about a pro contract. And so all of a sudden the person's looking at you, wait a second, I gave all this money and this guy, he doesn't look like he's a good player. Why are we getting? Because in the end, like you said, in college, more than the individual, they want the team to win. Where in the NBA, people are so locked in on the individual. The star of the team, a lot of time in the NBA, is the individual. In college, the star of the team is the team.
And that's why you're saying you're going after like teams and you're more players.
Yep. So I do have a question and somewhat of a statement and a question kind of posed to Coach. One of the consistent themes that we've heard in terms of the challenges around NIL for universities and collectives is right now, a lot of that money is coming from the donor pool. And they're essentially just giving that money, finding different ways to funnel it to the student athletes. But if these guys don't pan out, it's very hard for that university to then go back to those same donors and ask for another check the next year. And so it seems like, I think when we're talking about the money that's coming into the space, I think a lot of that money is going towards innovative solutions to figure out how to make this more sustainable so that we're not asking people for big checks, but that there's an underlying kind of a business environment, business chain underneath that supports it, as opposed to just donations.
So you're saying if a donor makes a big donation and like maybe the team or the player doesn't perform, then they're like, I'm not going to give as much the next time.
Well, yeah, I mean, for example, like, okay, because in college, like I can understand Stetson Bennett. I use Stetson Bennett as an example at the Georgia quarterback when they won the national championship last year. I mean, you could say you want to keep him, the retention, and there's so the opportunities to keep him because he's proven. Someone coming in, you don't know. I mean, it could be, and then all of a sudden, like Keith mentioned, if the young person doesn't perform to the expectations of that individual into the like Keith was mentioning about the collective or something, that person to go back to that source and say, hey, I need this money for the next player. They're going to look at you like, wait a second, the person I just gave to this is not performing. Why would I go to give this again? So like he said, how to sustain it where it's not maybe just based on performance, because if that's the base, then you're going on pay for play. It's how do you do it where it's more level, it's even. But you go back to where I go back to about the lawsuits. People can get sued if you stop them from things until there's a law that says federally hey, this is the parameters of what you've got that you're allowed to be under. And that way there can be no more lawsuits. Give the protection on that part.
But for Andy and Keith, when a donor makes a donation to the program or to a player, do they have to sign like a contract, or is it
We're
typically
not
a
in that-
donation?
We're not in that part of the
Okay.
business.
So they
Okay.
got
Collectives, go ahead.
That's collectives. They got
Okay.
the contract. The school has the contract. The school's got to have a look at the contract, but this contract can be what's the fair market value? And that's my point. You could do, okay, I just need you to do a tweet and I'll give you 50 grand. Is that really the market of that individual? Probably not, but that's the fair market value, because there really is on that. And so that's where that's coming in. And so because in some of those schools, because Keith and Andy's group are probably doing a little bit differently than maybe just a one individual. But when you're dealing with trying to get the players and maybe an individual talent, especially in basketball, where one or two guys can change your entire program. Like in football, you need a group because there's more people. Basketball, one or two players can literally change you from going to go to the Final Four. And so it's just such a different type of deal. And that's where that gets into the individual. I love what Keith and Andy are doing, because it takes that out of it based on whether you're a 5-star or 1-star, you're really good, or you're just, you have the same type of opportunities. It's not just based on, are you scoring 20 or not? The other part of it is where it gets really, a lot of gray area. What Andy and Keith are doing is that's what the NIL should be about. And that takes out the opportunity for, hey, and if you're Stetson Bennett and you produce, you're going to have more opportunities, but it's not on the front end. It'd be more on the back end based on your
Yeah, so then
production.
maybe talk a little bit more about that when going after the school or a team or something like that. And I guess, is there anything worked in if a player performs well, like a bonus?
The smartest players, I'll focus on football stuff I've read. I might not know firsthand, but they might spread it across the offensive line.
Yeah.
If it's quarterback, equally weighted, right? That's cool, right? That's
Yeah.
neat. So every school's different, every team's different, and they can do what they want with their NIL money. But I love reading about programs where the quarterback gets a big deal and he spreads it out with everybody on the team.
Yeah.
So
Where do you guys hope to see NIL go? I mean, the ceiling, I feel like it's just so high, and it's just, there's no limit at
I
this
think there
point.
needs to be more regulation around it, and I think that will come over time, but it is the wild, wild west right now.
Yeah.
It is.
Keith, what about you? I mean, what do you think?
I double down on that. I think I just need consistency across states, across time. Right now, it's just so many different players. Everybody's trying to figure it out. And so that's certainly the challenge.
Yeah, and I guess for you as a coach, I mean, do you just want to see it not pay for play, basically? Or do you want to see regularity where?
I think the NIL is great for the student athletes. I think it's a great deal. I think it's important for them to have the opportunity to do that. I just don't like it on the front end on a recruiting battle, because then it just becomes, hey, I can give you 100,000. The other person can give you 150. Well, you're going to take the higher. How do we eliminate the bidding war in the front end of it? So I am all for NIL. I think it's so important for the student athlete to give them those opportunities. I think it's actually better for the coach. It takes you a chance to get in trouble. Like you don't there's no reason to have an extra benefit violation ever again.
Yeah.
The issue though becomes on the front end of recruiting. How do you take that out of it? And I think that's the only way that's the way to do it, is you got to take it out on the front end somehow, some way.
But you're still finding that players want to win championships and things like that. But it's because now they're it helps my NIL deal if I get in championships and see in the spot, that kind of
If they
thing.
win the championship, they should make more NIL money.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So that's how you motivate them.
The
Yeah.
more you win,
That's how you coach.
That's exactly right. And that's based, you come in there, you win, you do great. And I understand but if it's the 18-year-old coming in, they make them earn it a little bit, in the sense when I say earn it, meaning that they come in, they're part of the team, and then you get whatever you want to get through the things like what Andy and Keith do. I think it's when you're saying, hey, if you come here, I'll just give you 100 grand. I would rather than say, okay, give us all a salary cap, in a sense. You have 400,000 and you give it to who you want to give it to on the front end. And then on the back end, you can do the NIL, because that way that would take out part of the recruiting aspect of in a sense of pay for play on the recruiting.
But does it create an interesting dynamic? And as a former player, maybe, I mean, you weren't paid in college, but that some guys are getting paid more than others.
College.
Yeah, we don't know legally. Yeah,
When it's Georgia,
exactly.
right? When it's Georgia.
But I don't know, the dynamic of in college is knowing this guy is making 500,000 and the guy next to you maybe isn't making as much. I mean, is that a weird dynamic, you think, or you're hearing any concerns from guys?
No, I know some universities and coaching staffs, kind of push the idea that they want to get the entire team involved on a lot of the NIL deals. We've signed some like that where like, for example, at LSU, we did a player card release where we signed the entire football team and everybody split it equally. So I think certain coaches are cognizant of that, but I think the reality is if it's, based on market value, it's the same as in the NFL. Everybody doesn't get the same marketing opportunities, the same deal opportunities. I think that's just the nature of the beast. The quarterback, the receivers, the running backs, they're probably going to get more opportunities because they have more marketable positions. Their face is going to be on TV a little bit more. And so I don't think that you'll see a whole lot of parity across the team, unfortunately.
But in the end, it's still about performance and winning. And the more you win, the more you make.
Mhm.
That's what I think, that would be a perfect scenario.
Yeah.
Bronny James probably won't go to the NBA because he might have all his NIL opportunities, right? And he's a guy you can't say that to. Because, right, so it's interesting timing right now. It's really interesting time.
Yeah, I am fascinated by it. I think we're kind of getting close to time, wrapping up. But does anyone have a question? I know we talked, okay.
I'm curious about what degree and how the Keith and Andy was discussed can coordinate the boosters.
So Mercury doesn't deal, we deal directly with universities. That might be more for.
I couldn't hear him.
Keith, do you deal with boosters? Like, how do you?
But Andy, you're not in any way with boosters, even when you're doing deals with the college.
Right now, it's all been directly with the university and then with the athletes directly. And no boosters.
And they haven't approached you.
I'm on the board, so I'm not day to day in the company, but I would imagine no. But Keith,
have the donors approached you or anything like that?
No, we've worked with the collectives who have a relationship with the donors, but we have not dealt directly with any donors.
Okay.
And let me say this on an NIL. So like a collective, what Keith just mentioned, like a collective is you put money in a collective and then collectives outside of a school. So technically the money's not going into a school fund. It's the collective has nothing to do. And then the collective, like somebody can tell the person who runs the collective, hey, Jimmy Joe, let's take care of Jimmy Joe. And, wink, wink, I'm not involved, but Jimmy Joe needs to be taken care of in a sense. That's what the collective is. Now, the collective is, when you think about it, a lot of times the person running the collective, they take a fee out of it before that. So the kid, you might say, I want to give him 50 grand, but the owner of the collective is taking a fee out of it. So the kid's not getting that directly. Whereas someone who wants, if an individual owner of a company or a product just says, I want to skip the collective and go directly to that individual, and I'll do a deal with that individual, and that way it takes out any fee. There's a way to do that. But the collectives are kind of the big thing now. And that is a separate entity.
Nothing to do with the university.
Yeah, you can't have anything.
But the university still have to have compliance.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would view the collectives as kind of like the intersection between a marketing agency and like a venture capital fund. And a lot of times the person that's sitting atop of the collective, and actually I think the new NIL guidelines, Coach, correct me if I'm wrong, that came out a couple of weeks ago said that the university can now kind of bring one of the collectives in-house, or they can support the collective.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
that's exactly right.
Question over here.
Okay, so I think the case with Texas A&M's football recruiting class last year has been really well publicized, and they're clearly performing very, very poorly on the field this year. I think the way things play out over the next year is going to be really interesting because we're still on the front end of this, right? We haven't seen how it plays out when it kind of snaps back.
This is still spring training.
Right.
It's not even the first inning.
Right. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about how that's going to snap back. And that, Josh, that kind of goes, with what you were saying before and how it impacts recruiting. Versus somebody like Kirby Smart, who has said, look, NIL is obviously something that's important, but we're telling our recruits, you guys have to come in here with the mentality that you're going to have to compete. You're going to have to be a part of the team. It's be less focused on the money, because if you're all focused on the money, maybe you're not the guy for us. How is that ultimately going to find some happy medium to work out for the team?
Well, look, I mean, I think one is as I mentioned earlier about on the front end of it, because Texas A&M football is a great example. Obviously, they had a great recruiting class, and maybe they haven't won as much as compared on the recruiting rankings in a sense. That being said, will the next, if someone had donated to a collective and the person and the individual's not performing, and you go back to that person, are they going to really want to give money if the individual's not performing? And so I think, and that's where I go back to, it should be more about the front end. How do we eliminate on the front end coming in saying, if you come here, you will get this amount of money, when like Kirby Smart is, like as you mentioned, is not, he's telling, hey, forget that, you got to come and compete, earn it. If you earn it, like a guy like Stetson Bennett's the quarterback, as Keith mentioned, the quarterback, the running backs, the receivers are going to get more than probably the linemen. That's just the reality of football. It's just like the guy in basketball who scores the most points will get more than the person who just gets more rebounds or. And so but that's based on a performance deal. And so somehow maybe there's a level playing field where you get this and you get that, everybody gets, and then use the NIL for an opportunity for retention and retainment and recruitment to keep guys in school to get their degrees. So more so than on the front end, like I've said, okay, we want to make sure these young men or young student athletes are getting their degrees. Well, is there a way to say, hey, if you stay and you get your degree, at the end, you will get a certain amount of money guaranteed, and you put it almost in a fund.
Yeah.
And then when you graduate, you're getting all this money, and it can get you set up for life right after school. And those are just things I'm just spitballing on that, but that's a way to do it, maybe.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That could help eliminate. That's a great idea, Josh.
Yes, no, yeah, and the transfer portal, and that's another thing that's thrown into it. You just, in the transfer portal can, you're dealing with individuals who have produced in college, who are going into the portal with the opportunity to say, let me see what my market value is on the portal. Think about it. If one of our guys on our team averages double digits in the ACC, they want to go in the portal, they'll command a high amount of dollars. So for me to retain the kid, I'll have to give him money, to retain him, or he'll go in the portal and get it from somewhere else. And that's where it becomes in that situation.
Unless he loves the coach.
Yeah.
You can love the coach as much as you want, but
Yeah.
The money.
Money talks.
Everyone says this is like the free agency in the NBA. I tell everyone this is not free agency. In the NBA, it's a totally different deal. When the contract's up, when there's a restricted free agent, when there's an unrestricted free agent, there's a cap. If you go over the cap, you got to pay a certain amount of taxes. This isn't the situation. This is just a person can leave at any point, and that's just the reality of it.
We got one last question. Hey guys, thanks for coming here. I really appreciate your time this morning. Kind of to shift gears a little bit, wanted to see if you can elaborate. This is probably more for Keith or Andy on the process for actually getting into the NFT space, and actually what are some of the barriers of entry, I guess, for anyone in this room who has any interest in even creating an NFT, kind of what that looks like, and
because of great question, because all the money flowing into this whole NFT NIL space, there's a lot of jobs out there now, and it's hard, whether it's coding, technology, blockchain, Web3, but just network. And I know some companies that are hiring. I'll talk to you after, but it's just learn as much as you can about it. I know very little about the space, and I know a lot already, right? Because I've been in it for 18 months, but just learn as much as you can. There's opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities because there's a lot of money going into the innovation of it.
Yeah, Keith, do you have any advice on, getting into it?
I would just double down on that. I mean, I'm still learning myself. When I jumped into it, I was more familiar with blockchain, more broadly than specifically NFTs. And so the learning curve is somewhat steep. But, to Andy's point, there's a lot of excitement around the space. There's a lot of companies that are being started to support the space. And so there's plenty of opportunities to get engaged at the ground level and kind of learn as you I guess, grow up in the space.
I got one more thing to say. A couple things. I don't know if you know this. He just got his MBA from Emory. Great job.
Wow, nice job, Keith.
Thank you.
I don't know this. He was a player also. He won the national championship at Arizona. I don't know if y'all know that, but he also played.
Oh yeah.
But Keith, that's a great example. Look at Keith. He's getting his MBA from Emory, graduating because you got your bachelor's from Georgia, right, Keith? And
Yes, sir. Yep.
Look at his career. He played big time
played in the NFL.
Yeah, no, he played at the highest level,
Yeah.
but his career beyond football, it just shows you and the power. And it's not all about the degree, but taking advantage of the opportunities that Keith took advantage of. In the position he's in now, it's a great example for many young student athletes to to recognize that.
Yeah, and the power of education, how
Power of
important it
education,
is, yeah,
absolutely.
and
We
marketability.
got a
and that.
professional soccer player in the back here, recently retired Mark Bloom. I just saw Mark back. He
Yeah.
would have made a lot of money on NIL with those looks back in the day.
Well, I think, am I getting the wrap? I'm getting the wrap. So I just want to thank Keith, Andy, and Josh so much. I mean, we could talk about
Thank
this forever. Thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you, Keith, for being sick.
Thank you all. Thank you all for having me.
I think that is the, I'll toss it over to you.
It's been a very informative and interesting morning. In conjunction with my co-chairs, I'd like to thank our panel today, who's been excellent. Andy, Josh, Keith, and our moderator, Allison, did a wonderful job. Thanks to everybody for getting up early this morning. Please hang out, network, and continue to grab some breakfast, and look forward for another business casual event in early spring. Thanks.